everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us here at the College of Business on this important conversation on race and equity. The first session we had was held back on the 22nd of July, which opened this three-part series, followed by our second session on September 9th. The first conversation laid the foundation of addressing issues of systemic racism and prejudices that are still present in our society. We looked at the introduction of slavery in our country and how it has created lasting effects that are harming to the Black and other minority communities in today's society. The conversation was continued to outline the legacy effects of discrimination that is plaguing the educational system and most of all the general society. As I have been attending the past sessions of the conversations on race and equity over the past few months, it sticks with me how important it is to raise awareness on even the small items of change to see improvement in the long run. Talking about how to include elements of diversity in the educational environment have allowed me to see that it is important for students to feel included in their classroom, representation, and involvements, which sets the tone for their future. We must do our part to make sure future leaders are in an environment to grow and of course represented. Thankfully, we have the support from administration, faculty, and students to help combat these social inequalities, beginning with the conversations that need to be had. As a society, and especially as a college, we have to extend understanding to those affected and uplift their voices in the process. This way, we can move towards an inclusive and just society. We understand that here at the College of Business, that all people from all walks of life have to be involved in a difficult conversation and make efforts to work on one another in addressing hate and inequity. Our Dean, Dean Lee, is truly an advocate for change and prosperity for our students on and off campus. Dean Lee met with and appointed Alexandria Buchan and Akeem Green as our COB Diversity and Inclusion Student Ambassadors, along with Sarah Noel and Jackeline Rada. These individuals, along with Diversity and Equity Fellows Debra, Vander, Fred Walumwa, and Donald Rooms, will help our college build a better sense of inclusion and diversity by advocating for more inclusion and opportunities for all. With her help and the rest of the faculty's support, we will be able to lead this conversation to real change. Today, we will be hearing from quite a few individuals, starting with our moderator, Brooke Buckman, who is an assistant teaching professor of global leadership and management. Our panelists include Kisha Jones, who is an assistant professor of global leadership and management, Debra VanDeMeer, professor of information systems and business analytics, and an AWED faculty fellow. Nykolaiszyn is a director in business career at FIU Business. Jackeline Rada is an FIU Business student ambassador for diversity and inclusion, and also an online student. Akeem Green is the FIU Business student ambassador for diversity and inclusion, and also the president of PIF. We are very thankful that we are able to have so many representatives to educate and begin important conversation. With the effort of many, we will continue on a path of required change of justice. So Brooke Buckman, you can take it away.
Wow, thank you so much, Natalie. And I will also speak to, if the number of squares on the Zoom call has anything to say with the number of people willing and wanting to step up and be a part of the change for FIU Business, it speaks to the testament of the community and the people we have in this community. So I'm excited to be here. I thank the Dean Student Advisory Board for sponsoring this three-part discussion. And I also want to acknowledge my two co-organizers, David Garcia, the president of the DSAB, as well as Dr. Donald Rooms. Both have been working since the middle of June on planning and organizing these important discussions. Today, for our third and final part of this three-part discussion, we're going to seek to build significantly on the foundations laid during the first two discussions. For the first half of our time tonight, we're going to turn our attention outward to look beyond FIU Business in order to better understand how companies and the future employers of our FIU Business students have begun to formulate their own answers to the nationwide call for racial equality. For that discussion, we have the two perfect panelists to cover the topic, but from very different perspectives. First, Dr. Kisha Jones, an expert on the topic of diversity and inclusion, and Mr. John Nykolaiszyn, the Director of Business Career Services here at FIU Business. During the second portion of our time tonight, we're going to turn our focus towards the various concrete actions that members across the FIU Business family have begun to take in order to create a more inclusive FIU Business experience for our students, for our faculty, and for our staff. A key message from our panelists conveyed during parts 1 and 2 of this discussion was an imperative that we have to move beyond words. We can't just talk, we have to walk. And I can tell you that many have stepped up to that call. We have 2 of our 4 newly appointed student ambassadors here to share their reasoning for why they stepped into these leadership positions, as well as giving us at least a small peek into what they've begun to plan for their inaugural initiatives. We also have Dr. Debra VanDeMeer, an advanced faculty fellow for the College of Business Equity Advisor. She's going to share her own perspective in terms of both of those roles, as well as understanding how looking out for and considering the diversity and inclusion component for faculty and staff also has a direct impact on our students' success. Finally, we have Dr. Donald Rooms, who has the unenviable task of summarizing other efforts and initiatives that we've learned about going out throughout the College of Business. And he's also tasked with helping us understand what's next once this panel discussions have concluded. So with all of that ground to cover, I'm going to move on to now officially introduce Dr. Kisha Jones, a brand new faculty member with the Global Leadership and Management Department, having just joined us this fall, prior to which she had spent 6 years on faculty at Penn State. Her research explores the recruitment, selection, and retention of individuals from diverse racial, ethnic, gender, social class, and mental health backgrounds. More importantly, she studies how those identities may intersect to impact the actual work experiences. Here at FIU Business, we are so lucky to have Dr. Jones joining us, and I have asked her to spend a few minutes highlighting some of the diversity initiatives that organizations have begun to implement, and perhaps more importantly, what organizations can do to ensure that they are successful. Dr. Jones, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Brooke, and thank you to everyone here. I am really excited to talk to you all about this topic, and I'm really glad that FIU is being proactive in having these discussions in order to help keep conversations like this going. I'll talk about this later, but one of the initiatives that has been implemented more recently to just kind of help process everything that's been going on has been to have conversations and allow people to have those opportunities to build authenticity. And so I think this is a great start, and it's an honor to be a part of this panel right now. So in thinking about the initiatives that organizations have implemented and whether or not they've been effective, it's first important to make the distinction between diversity and inclusion, where with diversity, there's more of a focus on increasing representation of different groups. And with inclusion, it's more so about making sure everyone feels comfortable and like they have a chance for success within an organization. And so some companies haven't in the past recognized that distinction, where there's just been an emphasis on increasing diversity, but then that results in there being a climate that's not really open and comfortable. There can be conflict that's not really addressed, and it could lead to turnover and decreased retention among people from underrepresented groups. And so taking the inclusion piece and incorporating that is going to be really important. It's also reflected in the approach or perspective that an organization may have towards diversity, which could be reflected in having just that focus on increasing diversity, or maybe avoiding litigation or the legal consequences of discrimination, compared with a perspective that values diversity and that having a diverse workforce can help enhance access to different clients and have a better knowledge of customers and how to better serve them. And so that's more so representing a business case for diversity, where the increased creativity and ideas can be useful in order for serving business purposes. But then there's also a perspective where it's not only about increasing diversity and representation, it's not only about just valuing diversity because of the potential economic benefits it could have, but also seeing diversity as a competitive advantage and a source of learning how to perform work in the organization, where there's not really assimilation, but groups that have traditionally been underrepresented or marginalized may have or may feel empowered to voice their opinion about how work is done, how processes are done, so that diversity and what can be learned from other people within that environment can then have that overall positive benefit on how the organization is run, as well as how people develop within organizations. And so if an organization has that perspective where they're really valuing diversity, really seeing the importance that having diversity in the workforce can bring, that would lead them to implement initiatives and a broad array of initiatives that are going to be useful in trying to help reach diversity goals. And so what's been found to be effective as far as diversity initiatives that have been found to be effective as far as leading to increases in representation. I'll talk more about practices that impact representation first, and then I'll go into some ideas around helping to promote inclusion. So with the diversity initiatives that work towards increasing the diversity of organizations, there's mainly been success when there are initiatives that engage managers and allow them to feel like they're a part of the process. And so one example of that would be targeted recruitment on college campuses, where companies would go out to not only college campuses, but professional organizations where they would have access to, let's say, different racial groups with the purpose of being able to bring them into the applicant pool and be able to include them among the people where they're making, or the applicants from whom they're making hiring decisions. And so as far as the success of the recruitment and increasing the diversity and talent of the pool, but also ensuring that there's buy-in from managers, because the organization is involving them in the process, that's often been found to be successful.
What does that look like, Kisha, in terms of buy-in from managers? What do we actually tend to see when organizations try to do that? Is it have them involved in kind of roundtable discussions, have them actually be the ones that go out to campuses?
Yeah, that was mainly it. So discussions as far as having them be involved with the recruitment strategies, or maybe the approaches that are going to be taken, but also having them be involved with going out to do the actual recruiting.
Okay, so like have a true accountability and ownership to that piece of it.
Yeah, and some skin in the game, I guess, as far as having this goal, being involved in the process versus maybe just being told that they need to increase diversity. But it's really a way to just help increase participation and engagement. So that's been
are you aware of a specific organization that's good at this in terms of an example or a case study, even if it's not current?
Well, no, not in particular. I was going to give some examples. I have some company examples that are more like more recent to what's going on now that I'll talk about later. But I was just giving an overview of the different strategies right now. Okay. So another one would be mentoring programs. So having a formal program where managers can sign up for it and then be assigned and be paired with a mentee that's from a racial minority group. Because oftentimes they're, or if you're thinking about like who in the organization typically is able to form those mentoring relationships more easily, it tends to be more so white males within the organization, but there may be white males who also want to be mentors. And so having the formal program where folks are paired up allows them to sign up and then have people be assigned to them. And with through engaging with mentees, being involved in showing them the ropes and sponsoring them for opportunities, this allows them to be familiar with their mentees and want to support their development. Another option or another practice that's been found to be successful kind of comes out of the contact hypothesis, where as groups have more opportunities to interact with each other, then they're better able to just have those experiences that allow them to build relationships. And it's often better when they're working towards a shared goal, like a company goal. And so one way to do this is by having self-managed teams where you have people who are in different roles across the company come together, work on a project, and it's self-managed, so everyone's working as equals. That gives opportunity for contact. And then also rotating management training programs which is something that's common among entry-level positions and something that recent FIU graduates may be likely to experience. But having the rotational programs also allows for contact, but then has the added benefit of giving the new employees more insight on the company as a whole. And then another practice that's successful is increasing transparency and social accountability. So as far as making hiring decisions or promotion decisions, or even like annual raises, managers are more likely to, or least likely to make biased decisions when they know they'll have to discuss their decision-making process with others, or have some form of follow-up or accountability for their actions. And so having diversity within the selection committee or having diversity task forces are a helpful way to do that. With diversity task forces, the CEO may even assemble the team among department heads, or may invite department heads to volunteer, and then have underrepresented groups be present. And so Medtronic is a company, their CEO is Omar Ishraq, and he's actually the head of the company's diversity council. And so he signs up on all the diversity goals. A current goal is to increase diversity in their board of directors and in their management and executive ranks. And so with him as the CEO, he's the chair of the diversity council. And so everyone's reporting to him on their process or on their progress. And so having the transparency and accountability is going to be really important. Now, as far as inclusion, because again, you want to bring people in, but then you also want them to feel comfortable, feel like they have a career trajectory, feel like they can actually be successful in the company. And so one way to do this is through conducting employee surveys. That's been found to be an effective method, but then you would segment the survey data by the different minority groups in order to ensure, like, let's say you're surveying for employee engagement, you would be able to look at the levels of engagement among the different groups and see if they're similar or if they're different. And if they're different, the company would know that there would be some work to do in that area. Mm-hmm. And one way of figuring out what's going on would then be to conduct focus groups. And so that would be kind of a next step from there, where you have independent facilitators, like you can be diversity consultants, but they come in and conduct the focus groups. That would allow employees to be able to feel like they can voice their opinions, or not feel like there's going to be repercussions for them saying or being open about that and open about what they think the company can do better. And then there could also be an increase in just feeling included, feeling heard through training managers on how to have more personal one-on-one discussions with their employees, where they could be open about challenges they faced in the past. The managers would be open, kind of show that vulnerability and authenticity and model that. And then that could hopefully help promote the relationship between the manager and the employee. Another way that employees in general are often able to feel included would be through workplace social events. So you may have formal events like parties, company picnics. We aren't really having those right now, but
post-pandemic, right?
Yeah, post-pandemic, we could dream of those in the future again. There could be informal events like happy hours, baby showers, professional development activities as well, community service events. But if you're from an underrepresented group, you may even feel like tokenized, where you may feel like you're the only one, or you may be, one of very few within your company. Those social events could feel more daunting. And like there's research showing that employees that are from underrepresented groups may anticipate having less fun or less enjoyment out of those social events because of just some difficulty in connecting with their fellow employees. And so if companies are aware of this, they can try to be proactive in setting up an environment that allows for social events to be more comfortable. So it could even be involving like an icebreaker or incorporating an icebreaker, or if it's a small group, having the leader go around and introduce everyone, as well as mention something that is unique about what they bring to the team or what they bring to the table. Also mentoring having that informal mentoring or even buddy systems where with a new hire, that person already has a point of contact that they've started to build a relationship with. So things like that, just companies being aware of that from the beginning, and then helping to set up social events in a way or do things in order to help employees feel included is going to be helpful and has been found to be helpful. And finally, I'll talk a bit more about there's some specific examples of company initiatives that have been found to promote inclusion. So one is from PricewaterhouseCoopers, where the CEO, Tim Ryan, created a platform to allow employees to talk openly about issues of race. So this platform was created after the murder of Botham Jean, which was, I believe, 2 years ago. But it's something that's continued. And so it's led to candid conversations and opportunities for learning. It's led to Black employees and other employees of color to feel more comfortable sharing their concerns about experiences of racism or interactions with the police. It's also allowed white employees to share their opinions and their experiences with discussing these issues with their children. So it's just led to an overall conversation that's been helpful, mainly because prior to things like this being implemented, especially with the different events that have happened recently, I know Black employees may feel more like there'd be repercussions if they talked about them openly within the company. And so having that dedicated space and encouragement of conversations around race, racial inequality, et cetera, is something that's going to promote inclusion and allow for people to have the opportunities to learn from each other. And then another example I'll talk about is with the employee resource groups at AT&T. So employee resource groups, they're mainly like employer recognized groups of employees from a shared background or demographic. So there may be ones for different racial groups, for instance. And so those are fairly common within large organizations, but AT&T stands out in that they devoted funding and resources towards building the groups. That allows the different groups to engage in professional development, activities, and community service. They also promote networking across the employee resource groups so that connections are built not only within the employees that have that shared background across the company, but also across the different employee resource groups. So it allows for even more sharing of knowledge and opportunities to network. And they also host an annual conference of all members of employee resource groups to come together, network, and potentially partner in trying to reach some of the shared group goals. So those are two examples of ways companies are taking diversity initiatives, especially around inclusion, which is extremely important, and kind of taking it to a different level. So I'll stop there. I just talked a lot. So are there any questions, or I'll let Brooke, you can take back over.
Well, I think you just kind of schooled us. You gave us a ton of information to think about. I think you've given us almost a checklist for FIU Business when we're starting to think through what initiatives, what things should we be considering for both the diversity side and the inclusion side. What are the benchmarks we want to hold ourselves against? So I think you've given us a ton of content to think about. Does anyone on the panel have a question for Kisha? Do you see, Kisha, I'll ask you this. Do you see this moment being a bit different than past times? Do you see this as a true inflection point? And I'm going to ask a similar question to John, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that right now.
So like our current time, yeah, I think so, just because I think the series of events that happened, the nature of the pandemic, and more opportunity for self-reflection. And I think people being open with their feelings about not only like acknowledging things like white privilege, white supremacy, like those are words I hadn't really heard in the broader culture, like kind of ever. You would hear that in niche groups or among conversations with certain people, but yeah, not really a national conversation around it. So I think this is I do think it's a different time, and I think companies are reacting to that and trying to do more to be, I guess, more authentic in how they're promoting diversity and inclusion in their companies. Whereas before, and I do think this is still an issue for companies to overcome. People may feel that the company is just doing it just because they have to, or doing it just to say that they've implemented diversity initiatives, kind of like an A for effort, but no real consequences or accountability. And so as we see more companies establishing like positions like chief diversity officer, or having dedicated employees within the company that address diversity issues, I think that'll just continue to allow the momentum from now to propel things forward.
Well, that is a hopeful point to end on, I think. So thank you so much, Kisha. And I will put a plug. Professor Jones teaches our Managing Diversity elective within the Global Leadership and Management Department. So if we have students listening that are interested on these topics, they recognize that we need more people within organizations that have these skill sets, definitely check out her course and enroll in it in the future semesters. Okay, well, next we have John Nykolaiszyn. He's the Director of Business Career Services at FIU Business. He's an FIU alum from the 90s. I'll leave it at that, John. I won't go more specific. He's been working in the FIU Business Career Services office for over 10 years, if my math is correct. Yes. And on John's LinkedIn profile, he states, "I am best when I get the chance to help companies, HR managers, talent acquisition folks, and even students move away from the typical and engage in practices that will yield unexpected results. And that's where you'll find me operating at my best." So that's why we needed John to be part of this conversation today. And so, John, I'll actually lead off from exactly where we just ended with Professor Jones.
Sure.
What are you hearing and seeing from the companies that you're in contact with when it comes to this most recent inflection point in terms of calls for racial equality and the need for corporations to step up and be a part of that change?
So I agree. Kisha, I agree with everything you said. I couldn't do the big cheers here, but I was like, yes. There are, I also echo your same sentiment where, there are companies out there that are just kind of going through the motions or doing it. But where I see it, and I hope that it sticks, and that was my my comment to Brooke in an earlier conversation at this inflection point, is that I think now we will start to see some stickiness behind these efforts. I think now we've reached a point where, and I've been, in the trenches for 10 years, and in the recruiting. Prior to joining FIU, I was in corporate recruiting, and so seeing it from the corporate side and seeing it from the academic side, you kind of know when someone's lying to you a little bit, and so I think we're going to see, I don't want to say lie, but when they're giving you a line that you just don't really believe. But I think we're going to see some stickiness, and we've seen it with some of our previous clients. And some are faster along the curve. Some new clients are getting on the curve and embracing and engaging, and that's exciting to see. And some are status quo, which is fine. I think that this challenge, I don't necessarily think that the company can't do it. I just think that it's so ingrained in the corporate culture, and it's so difficult to change that it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not our fault. It's not the students' fault. It's the organization just has this entrenched memory. The rise of the ERGs within organizations. I've seen that in the last 5 years at the master's level, at the Hispanic MBA conference and the Black MBA conference, and the attendees from the companies are engaged and happy members of the ERG, but their powers are limited to a certain point, and then corporate HR kicks in, and then you have some additional challenges there. So, but I do truly believe that our students are very, very lucky at this stage of history and time, and have an opportunity to capitalize on what's happening in the marketplace and what's happening in what's happening in the world of work, if you will.
Well, and let me follow up on that point, because I think we've talked about that in a little bit more detail. What tips or advice do you have for our students when it comes to standing out amongst the competition in the workforce? Like, how can we help our students actually embrace or utilize this moment to identify their own strategic advantage when it comes to other individuals on the job market? How are they going to stand out? How can they stand out? What is it about their own experience, the culture in which they've grown up, they've lived and thrived in, that makes them a good fit for organizations looking for this leadership and this skill set right now?
I think it's important that, you know, students have to be comfortable about specifically talking about themselves. That's probably the easiest deficit to overcome during the interview process, is not being afraid to talk about themselves, talk about their experiences. And that is a challenge. That's a challenge across all levels, at the undergraduate level and even the graduate level. So I think students, you know, understanding the value that they have, understanding the valuable life experiences, work experiences, culture experiences. You know, I'm proud to be an FIU alum. I'm a Miami native. You know, I take it for granted being in a multicultural environment, and I get nervous when I leave Miami because it is the Miami bubble. And I think students, we can do a better job of preparing our students to leave the bubble, and to know that they're going to face some challenges when they leave the bubble and go to, you know, when they go to New York City, or they go to Virginia, or they go to Atlanta, or they go up to Texas or Delaware. I don't mean to make fun of Delaware, but you know, but when they go out to when they leave the Miami bubble, they, and I'll be bold, you know, they may experience what it's like to be a minority for the first time. And so this is something that we, and through these programs and through the program, we can do a better job of that and kind of help explain it. But the students can also, our students also have the ability to overcome that quickly and make a difference. And I really believe it. They deserve and belong and can compete with anybody. And so I'm very proud about that.
And I think that's really useful. It's important to look at both sides of the coin, right? Not only do our students, are they particularly well skilled and have the right competencies to thrive in an environment that embraces diversity and inclusion, but they also have their own upbringing and their own experiences of growing up in a very unique place, typically like South Florida. What are some of the examples, war stories, things that you've heard of that have actually popped up as challenges to students when they do leave the Miami bubble? Because kind of thinking about diversity and inclusion from our own students' perspective, they need to begin to be more self-aware of where their limitations are or where their blind spots are. What are they maybe going to walk into in terms of additional challenges outside of our FIU warm and fuzzy bubble?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, being in a bubble is very, very comfortable. And so, you know, you're gonna miss the family, you're gonna miss the friends, you're gonna miss the culture. There are some firms that are doing it right, and have really understood that you know, recruiting at FIU is a holistic experience, and the fact that you can go to business, you can go to engineering, you can go to computer science, but you've got to care and feed these alumni when they leave. And that's the added bonus of these employee resource groups coming in, or alumni groups coming in. So, you know, New York does a great job with an excellent alumni association and a group out there, and kind of helping the students acclimate. Students that have an opportunity to go to beautiful Auburn Hills, Michigan, with Fiat Chrysler. You know, Fiat figured it out over the years how to care and feed for them, and the students and the alumni naturally coalesced to thrive in the environment, including the snow. But they were able to thrive, and that, you know, that kept the retention numbers high, and then obviously more students would move up. And I think the big four that actively recruit, they also do a very good job with the care and feeding of the alumni, and making them feel at home and whatnot.
And by big four, we mean the big four accounting firms.
Yes.
People watching are
yes.
So KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, and I'm forgetting one.
Deloitte.
Yes.
So they do an excellent job. I think so, and I think industry wise, you see that trend in industry. So financial services, advisory, manufacturing, in some cases. Now there are some larger. The one horror story that I will say, but the firm has to remain anonymous. I'll just say this because but it is true. I can split it up over two areas, but we did have some students that were going to interview with some firms in the Midwest. Obviously, South Florida doesn't have a large corporate headquarters, but when you get into places like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Chicago, sorry, Minnesota's a state, Wisconsin, Illinois, Chicago, the firms there's some large corporate headquarters. One of the questions or one of the areas of discussion that will go down during an interview process, especially if you're from South Florida or the Caribbean or the hemisphere that we live in down here, they'll ask you about the cold. And I'll never forget the sales rep manager from this organization. He was part of the ERG. He was a great guy. We had a great time at dinner. We had some very good conversation. The next day I was in Starbucks getting ready to go into the session, and he pulled me to the side and he says, "John, when I interview your students, I'm going to ask them about this, and you need to tell them that they need to tell me they're okay with the cold and that they like to snowboard and that they don't mind the snow." And part of me is a little horrified. Part of me is like, oh my God, how could you ask that? The HR person in me was just like, what the hell? And I've got to have the poker face. Absolutely, no problem. I get it. And that's a very real discussion, and while it's not disparate treatment, it sure as hell is disparate impact. And, so
it will definitely reduce the number of our students that will end up receiving offers to positions like that.
Yes. And that's just a challenge in the recruiter's brain. And it's just a bad tool for them to use to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, but again, there are some positives there. We do have students, we have prep students and help them with their interviews. And, I've brought it up and told them, hey, look, it may come up. You've got to be honest and answer the question honestly. Because, I believe in the honest. You have to answer questions honestly. Yep. But I also think that you also have to be pragmatic and understand that, the company's not going to invest in you if they think you're going to leave after the first tough winter. So, when you do make it through those rounds, it's going to work out. And I'm very proud to say that the bulk of the students that are up there, the ones that I've talked to and prepped and had great conversations with, they're there, they're thriving, they love it, they get it. And that's also helped bring up more students as well. So there's some good things happening on that side.
I'll ask you one final question, John.
Yes, perfect.
So in terms of kind of returning to the discussion from Kisha, what can our students look for if they want to go work for an organization that is doing more than just the talk? They're walking the talk. What are the things that students should be doing in terms of their own research, their own preparation to identify organizations that value diversity and inclusion? What are the signals, the signs that will be evident for them in terms of making those decisions and identifying those organizations?
So I would say now, with the research tools that we have, I think I still love, I still challenge the students to read multiple news sources. So the Herald, the WAPO, the Wall Street Journal. And I think the Journal gives you some interesting perspectives. But when you see organizations that are hiring D&I officers, mm-hmm. and that are coming from or that have an opportunity that have this background that they see, that they admire, that's a big sign. So I would say, pay attention to who's put a newly hired D&I officer in, and where is that officer's background or resume. And you can look them up on LinkedIn, because that's one aspect. And then the graduate school aspect would be I would also dig a little bit further and see if that initiative or if that inclusion effort has funding from the organization. Like, is the company funding this initiative, or is it just hot air? And you can do research and dig some more and start networking around and asking that question. But if organizations are doing it and they're not paying lip service, then they're hiring great folks to be in D&I roles and and funding it for the future to ensure success. Two great examples. I actually had an opportunity. I worked for one of them. I'm proud to say I worked for one of them. He was a great guy, and he'll make fun of me later on Facebook for this. But the current officer, the current global diversity officer for MondelēZ, Robert Perkins, he just transitioned over to them. And Robert's a great guy. So MondelēZ, and if you don't know, MondelēZ makes Oreos. So.
They're the old craft foods, yeah.
They're the old craft foods, and let's throw KKR in for historical fun. And Spotify. Spotify just brought back my friend Travis, who was at the Fed, then he was at JP Morgan, and then he was at Universal Music, and they got him back as the global diversity officer for Spotify. And Travis is a friend of FIU and a friend of FIU Business. I know him personally, and he's going to go in and do some great things. So there are individuals that are getting hired in these roles now that walk the walk, talk the talk, and have the funding. And that's what I would look for. I would do my research there. And then obviously talk to people in career services, talk to your professors, because that's our job. We should know these things or be able to help research that quickly.
You had also mentioned something about recruiters in terms of using who's coming, who's recruiting. And that might not be always a completely fair assessment, but talk a little bit about that.
I think what I'm happy to see with the recruiters is that firms are the firms that come to us and get it have not only started sending individuals that look like and sound like and that students can look up to in the role, which is very, very important, but that they're also coming back and giving of their time and they really can answer a lot of the questions. It's not just this on the surface, oh, I'm just here because I'm Hispanic and you're Hispanic, and or I'm Black and you're Black and we gotta, we're just doing this.
They're invested.
They're invested. And I will say that, and I'll end with this because this was probably the best conversation I had. There was a senior officer in a company, and we were having a quick cup of coffee and doing a quick download, and he said, John, do you really want to know the reason why I come here? And I was like, sure. I mean, you can be candid with me. I love it. And he said, I can go down the street to the university that was in the Midwest. It's got the top logistics program in the nation. I can go down there. But what the problem is? And I was like, no. He said, the problem is that everybody looks like you and me. I come to FIU because they don't look like you and me, and that this is the future. And I understand this, and that's what's going to move us forward. And it was completely off the cuff. It wasn't like contrived. It wasn't complete BS. And I was just like, okay. And that made us want to work harder for them and help them understand and embrace and do more. But it was really wonderful to hear that there are organizations out there that get it. And that was 4 years ago.
Wow.
That was 4 years ago. So
that really ties what Kisha had mentioned earlier in terms of one of the best practices is organizations throwing wider nets and making the effort to go to places that get you more diverse pools of applicants. And we, FIU Business, is one of those pools that some organizations are waking up and starting to realize that we have a competitive advantage. We have a particular student population that can fulfill a lot of the needs of these organizations around the country and around the world.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, John.
No, please.
We have time for maybe one or two questions before we move on to part 2 and really download on everything that we as a FIU Business organization have begun to implement. Does any of our panelists have a discussion for either Dr. Jones or John in terms of what they were, their talking points and their contributions? Otherwise, we can move on. Okay, awesome. Well, then we will move on. Thank you so much to the two of you. Please stick around, because if we have more time, we might even have some more questions as well. I feel like I've already learned so much. I'm like, my head's already spinning. I have so many ideas, but that is kind of the perfect transition to where we are headed next. And I'm really excited about this upcoming set of speakers. First, we have Jackeline Rada, an FIU Business online student majoring in marketing, and also one of the 4 student ambassadors that the dean has recently appointed to focus on diversity and inclusions initiatives here at FIU Business. So Jackeline, would you care to share a little bit more about how you came to be a student ambassador and what it means to you in terms of fulfilling this role?
Of course. Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here. For me, it's been an amazing experience. I am an online student, so I was never involved on anything before in the university. I was always very active, like attending to workshops and everything else, but I wasn't aware of all the possibilities that I had at FIU to be part of all of these organizations. So Dean Lee, she appointed Alex and Akeem a couple of months ago. And I love diversity and inclusion. I've been involved in diversity and inclusion before. So I was like, oh my God, they're creating one at FIU. I would love to be part of it. So I emailed Dean Lee and I talked to her about my experience, about my purpose, about my goals. And she was super welcoming. She got the time, she made a time to talk to me, and she gave me an opportunity, and it's been an amazing experience. It's been super inclusive, talking about inclusivity. It's been super inclusive and being part of so many things in the past 2 months that I had, didn't even have an idea that I was able to do so much in so little, and to learn so much from all the faculty, from my team. It's been amazing. So I took a shot at it. I wasn't sure if it was going to happen, but it did, and it's been amazing. We're working on amazing initiatives. We will discuss more.
I hear there's 4 initiatives total. Do you want to give us kind of the sneak peek to maybe 2 of them, and then we'll have Akeem discuss the other 2?
Yes, for sure. We're working on 4 initiatives, as you mentioned. One initiative podcast.
Jackeline, hold on one sec.
Because we want to make it a space for everyone. I'm sorry?
I think we're having some technical difficulties, or maybe I was. Was anyone else struggling with that to hear?
Same thing was happening for me too.
Okay, let's start over, Jackeline. In terms of the initiatives, there's a little bit of delay in the internet.
Podcast, yes, we're working on one podcast, the diversity and inclusion podcast. We were referring to it as the untold stories of FIU, because we wanna learn about everyone. We're gonna try to make it as diverse and inclusive as possible. So we want to learn about everyone. We want to welcome everybody who wants to participate, to tell us about their stories, their backgrounds, their expectations, their life at FIU. So it's going to be more like kind of learning space where people are going to feel safe and to tell their stories, and they're going to feel accountable. But because we care about listening to those stories, because we think that everybody is amazing and everybody should trust their background, their stories, their accomplishments. And I know that we're here to listen, and we think that we want to give a space for everyone to be present and to feel accountable. Our second initiative is a type of certification. That will be like a series of workshops that will work on the leadership skills and like some type of training for a student to learn more about diversity and inclusion, to learn how to put in on the work when they're applying to a job, or just in a day-to-day life. So it's a series of workshops that will link to a type of a micro-credential that students can take after they graduate, and then they can go, for example, to an interview and say like, hey, I was also part of a certification program on diversity and inclusion at FIU. I learned about this. This is what I want to put in practice. So I think that it will be like a great experience for everyone, like a learning experience, like an extra learning experience for them. So when they graduate, they'll have like that extra
Training.
like training, that extra training and experience and like background to know what to do, or what to expect when they go to the workforce.
That both initiatives sound really value adding. I think they check so many of the boxes that Dr. Jones was describing in terms of what qualifies or what you would define as an effective initiative in terms of driving both diversity, but more importantly, perhaps inclusion, especially in terms of the experience of the students.
Yeah. So we're very proud of those two initiatives. I'm going to let Akeem talk about the other two.
Excellent. And then I will move on to Akeem then. So next we have Akeem Green. He's the second of our student ambassadors and an FIU student working towards earning his degree in economics. He's also the director of the Global Capital Markets at Phoenician Investment Fund, which is an FIU student-run initiative dedicated to further educating its members in the language of finance and investing. So Akeem, you had a little bit different journey to becoming one of our student ambassadors. Please share a little bit more about your experience and two of the other initiatives that you guys are working towards.
Absolutely. And just to make a small correction, I'm currently the sitting president of the Phoenician Investment.
I'm sorry.
No,
about
no,
that.
absolutely fine. But if you do want to get in touch with the director of Global Capital Markets, his name is Emmanuel Martinez, and he's a fantastic guy. Now, just to go over a little bit of my story about how I became involved with the initiative. So after the protest, after the killing of George Floyd, I remember my friend and colleague, David Garcia, who is another fellow member of the Phoenician Investment Fund, reached out to myself and another one of our board members to speak at the first conversation. Our other board member was busy with an internship at UBS at the time, so he asked me to take his place, and I humbly accepted for a couple of reasons. So about a month prior to the conversation, I had actually just finished attending an Advancing Black Leaders Conference hosted by JP Morgan's Corporate and Investment Bank. And the purpose of the meeting, once you attend the meeting, it's very general. They give you a very nice introduction to the firm, what they do, they teach people about the opportunities that are there. But what I realized after attending the meeting was that people, like, there's so many new initiatives that are coming out this year. And when we watch the news, we see so much negative, we see all the politics, we see all the arguing. And I think it's time that we start bringing forward the positive that's going on in this world so that we can start promoting all of these positive initiatives that firms, companies, and universities are launching across the nation. So one of our initiatives that we came up with was to host a series of town hall meetings where we want to bring some of those organizations to FIU so that they can communicate directly with the students about the good that's going on in the world. The other initiative that we have is an internship program that we're planning on offering to students. A very common issue that I see for students when they're in the recruiting pool, especially in the field of finance, which is very competitive, is that they need experience. They need some kind of experience that can get them out there into the real world so that they can see what it's like. Because when these employees are comparing students and both students have a 4.0 GPA, they're going to pick the student with more experience. So we want to be able to bring some of those experiences to our students, and that's the reason why we're planning on having that internship program here at FIU Business.
Wow, I can, if we have even another handful of students as inspiring as Jackeline and Akeem, I think we're in really good hands when it comes to student leaders leading on the topic of diversity and inclusion. And I'm very excited to see what accomplishments come their way in the next year. So I wish you all the best of luck in those initiatives, and be sure to utilize all the people in these square boxes here as resources as you guys continue to flesh out these ideas in more detail. So next, we have Dr. Debra VanDeMeer, who has she's a full professor within the Department of Information Systems, and she holds two important titles for our purposes here, but is also a very accomplished researcher on the technical topics of information systems. First, she is an advanced faculty fellow with the Office to Advance Women, Equity, and Diversity. That's a university level office. And she also holds she's one of the first to hold the position and title of Equity Advisor for the College of Business. So I want to say welcome, Dr. VanDeMeer. First, would you like to explain those two titles, kind of how they differ, what they mean in terms of all of your efforts when it comes to diversity and inclusion for us?
Thank you, Brooke. And thank you to the board for inviting me here to come and speak with you today and maybe explain a few things about how I've come to hold those titles. It's very, it's new. So the Office to Advance Women, Equity, and Diversity within FIU is it's based on a broader effort across the country to support issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion among faculty, among academic workplaces. Because remember, you know, while FIU is here to offer you classes and teach you and give you great skills, you know, this is where we work. And all of the things that that John Nykolaiszyn was talking about and Dr. Jones was talking about, they're all here. And, you know, everything that we're telling you, you're going to experience in the workplace, you know, for good or for bad, exists here among the workplace here. So, you know, in 2016, the provost formed the Office for Advancing Women, Equity, and Diversity. And the advanced part of that is actually a broader initiative across the entire country at a lot of different universities to build programs that interact, where faculty can interact with the ideas and the research and the practices that we can put in place in how we treat each other, in how we hire people, how we attempt to retain people, how we, you know, how we make decisions about who gets to do what in our faculty governance processes. And much of what the office has done thus far has been around just starting the conversations. You know, so, you know, for example, there's a series of training seminars that are focused on faculty who sit on search committees, and the search committees are the groups of people who decide who gets to, you know, who we would like to invite to join the faculty, which translates directly into who's going to teach you. Mm-hmm. You know, and how can we ensure that we are opening and inviting in our candidate pool, and how do we make sure that, you know, a broad and diverse and inclusive set of people apply? That means we need to go and invite them, you know, and if we're not an inviting place, how can we expect, you know, how can we expect people to feel welcome? Mm-hmm. So, you know, it starts from there, and in how we practice and how we treat each other on a daily basis through the practices of academia. So, you know, that said, what is a faculty fellow? A faculty fellow is just a volunteer. Really.
Fewer hours in the day to sleep. You're giving a few hours of your sleep up to go do this
exactly
as well.
It's a volunteer who's willing to start these discussions, who's willing to run the little seminars that that the faculty come and we all talk about, well, you know, what does the research say? What are these things that we may be doing that we don't even realize we're doing, and yet can be interpreted or you know, misinterpreted or unintentionally done so that we don't create, you know, an uninviting or unwelcoming or uninclusive workplace. This is, and while this is a faculty oriented thing, it's not necessarily the only thing that's going on. Mm-hmm. So there's a second role and it's a step beyond. The faculty fellows have existed from the beginning. You know, you've all heard from Dr. Smith in a prior conversation, yes? Yep. I'm fairly sure that she served as one of the earlier faculty fellows. Oh. you know, and you've mentioned that Dr. Fred Walumba is has joined us as well. You know, so, but the second role that you mentioned is called equity advisor. And that's a new role. And what it's attempting to do is to ask the departments and the faculty among the departments, well, okay, now we've told you how to do this. So what are you actually doing? You know, how can I help you to put in place actual practices? Can I help you track your progress? Can I, you know, can we do this? You know, can I be a cheerleader? I can do that too. So that we don't just talk about it, but we do it, and we track, you know, not necessarily metrics. Well, we'll track the metrics, but we'll track not only the metrics, but how we feel about it and how we feel about the workplace that we're creating and the culture that we're creating within our academic workplace. Does this make sense?
It does. It sounds like it's a lot of responsibilities. It really sounds kind of taking the conversation full circle. We're putting into practice many of the best practices that Dr. Jones mentioned at the beginning of the session. And so it almost gives us the opportunity to have a report card. And are we covering our basis and checking the boxes on both diversity, which is getting faculty and staff that are representative of kind of all ethnicities and backgrounds, but also on the inclusion side, it seems like that's the newer piece of it, and saying, okay, once we get the numbers to be kind of where we want them to be, how are we going to retain our faculty? How are we going to retain the staff? How are we going to provide everyone the resources and the support they need so that they want to stick around? They want to be part of FIU business for the long term.
Right. Could I also add that you may have also noticed that there's an effort led from the president, but run primarily by the VP of Human Resources. And you know, it's focused more on race, and it's broader in general for the university, entire university environment. So if you think about it, you know, now there's this faculty focused version of things. There's a broader focus across the entire university. The College of Business has a student board and student ambassadors. And you can expect to see probably further efforts that are specifically focused on the staff workplace. You know, if you look at it, there's a tide of initiatives coming, and people that are actually saying the words inclusion and equity and you know, and talking about what happens, and you know, for her or for, you know, for good, we're at least mentioning and seeing it, you know, whereas in the past it's just, you know, often been quite swept under the rug.
I'm glad you share the same sentiment. It sounds like from Professor Jones, who says she has hope that this might be a little bit of a different time. John has also shared that same feeling that maybe this time is going to be different. Things are going to stick, that change is actually going to come. So I think the fact that we're getting a broad sense of consensus on that is warming and gives me a sense of optimism as well. Let me ask you one last question, Debra. Okay. In terms of making the connection, because I know you are faculty focused in a lot of the roles and responsibilities you have, you want to make sure that the experience for faculty is fair and equitable. How do you make that connection for how that impacts student success? Where do we draw the line from faculty diversity and inclusion to why that benefits our students?
Well, there's a number of different ways, but first and foremost, there's the sense that we're supposed to be here for you. We're not only supposed to teach you, but we're supposed to help you, right? We're supposed to mentor you. We're supposed to answer questions for you about, well, what is it really like there out in that big world that is maybe outside the FIU bubble or outside the Miami bubble, you know, or the broader South Florida version of it. And, you know, I'll tell you, I'm from outside that bubble. So I know well, I've experienced cultural whiplash many times. But where does it help you if if the faculty workplace is better? How does that help you? Well, the more that faculty feel like they're in a safe space, the more that faculty feel like their own employment and their own roof over their heads and how they're going to feed their children is not in jeopardy. And if you think about it, many of the practices that are inequitable and non-inclusive are things that make you feel like the ground is not safe under your feet, right? That takes headspace, and it takes headspace from, in our heads away from you and away from what we can give you, away from the quality of what we can deliver in the classroom, and away from, the experiences we can give to you in active learning, and the way that we can and help you be more curious about what we're trying to get you to understand. Because if we're worried, we can't help you solve your problems or answer your questions or offer you advice. It's lower quality. And, the more that we can create an environment where everybody feels safe, students, staff, faculty, everybody, the more productive a place it'll be. And the more productive a place it is, the better it is for you, because you get a better experience.
I think that's very well said. And I'm sure anyone on this committee or on this session can really agree with that and think and relate to it in a lot of different ways. It also just helps if we focus on getting diversity and inclusion numbers up for FIU Business. It helps our students just from a representation, from a role modeling. It goes back to the number of students that are inspired by Dr. Antoinette Smith to see her as an accounting professor. And when they are accounting students, they see that I can be a successful accountant as well. And so it really goes back to not only making us effective in the classroom, but role modeling and being there as kind of symbols for what our students can accomplish as well. Well, thank you for everybody's contributions. I am going to turn the floor over to my esteemed colleague. And I want to turn over the floor to Dr. Donald Rims, my co-organizer, my friend, and most importantly, FIU Business's Faculty Director of Student Success Initiatives. I will say that he is one of the most dialed in members of the FIU Business community when it comes to these causes, and he has done so much to empower me, the many students he mentors, as well as many other faculty and staff within the FIU Business community. And so he has a few closing words, as well as maybe a few other initiatives we have going on around the College of Business that he can speak to in a little bit of detail.
Okay, thank you very much, Brooke. Thank you so much to everybody. Wow. I mean, wow, what a session we've had. I'm just excited. I'm just trying to contain myself now. But first of all, it is all good because the first thing I want to do is really thank all of our panelists for your participation today. Dr. Kisha Jones and John Nykolaiszyn. I refer to you guys as subject matter experts. You are the one who really are close to what's happening out there in the workplace. You were, for today's session, our subject matter experts, and we thank you so much. Dr. VanDeMeer, one of our 2 FIU Business Advanced Faculty Fellows. I'm so glad that you could join us. I know that you wanted to join us last time, but we're so glad you came in today. What you had to share was really great in terms of getting us grounded in how a lot of consensus is being built across the university. That is so true. And we're really going to be tapping into that. Jackie Rada, our student ambassadors, Jackie and Akeem, thank you so much for your valuable inputs to our conversation today. And we look forward to continue working with you. And then to our own DSAB, that's a Dean Student Advisory Board, our own 2 student leaders, David Garcia, the president, and Natalie Lamas for her beautiful and well-grounded introduction. I must say that already we're seeing the fruits of building our student leadership into what we can truly, and we're really proud of. So thank you. Huge thank you goes out to Dr. Buckman for her commitment and her stellar role as a moderator for the 2nd time around. Look at it. Kudos. Dr. Buckman, I must tell you, I believe that you found a new role in our student relations team. So thank you so much. There is more to come. So thanks again to all our panelists. In wrapping up our series, I want to just draw a bit on a principle I know of, being from my geology background, principle of uniformitarianism, which states that the Earth, the current changes that we see in the Earth are a result of continuous processes through time, and that the present is the key to the past. The principle really is excellent in using the clues from present fossil record to explain what is happening and what has happened in the past. Similarly, I would like to think that what we've discussed here today and throughout this entire series, that we are laying the groundwork for those who will be coming behind us. I want to think that we're building a legacy for current students, but also for those who will come after us. What exactly will our college look like? What is going to happen later on in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from today? So like uniformitarianism, we are building a college that we will surely be proud of. So our conversation is building a momentum. Our conversation has begun something that, you know, it started with a tragedy, or you'd see an injustice, a grave injustice, such as George Floyd, and Natalie in the beginning told us about all of that. But the manifestations that we saw from very earlier on with the injustices caused us to question, how did we get here? And that was the role of the first session. Despite having abolished slavery, living through MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., and despite passing civil rights laws, despite our US Constitution upholding the principle of equality, how did we really get here? And so we had that discussion in part 1 of the series. In part 2, our focus gave free expression to our students as to the kind of college, the kind of business school we want to have, one that is truly supportive of change in race relations, proactive in advancing initiatives or mentoring, and we heard a lot about that tonight. We want an institution that is caring and sensitive to the needs of all students and willing to listen and act. As a result, our Dean Lee, instituted 2 major initiatives, and we've seen them. One is the inclusion, the Diversity and Inclusion Student Ambassador Program, and the second being the Faculty Fellows, appointed by the Provost's office and announced by our Dean, working in tandem with our student leaders to participate in diversity and in inclusiveness programs. So we have seen that according to Dean Lee, their partnership represents the first of such effort to really collaborate with our student leaders to provide a more inclusive college for all. So that brings me to this evening's presentation and to summing up what we have achieved and to ask, most importantly, where do we go from here? So first I want to highlight the fact that we have a dean who puts first students. Students are at the center of the focus of our business school, and rightly so, in its vision and its operation. We certainly thank her for that commitment, putting her mouth where her money rather, where her mouth is. To put not just the words, but to support these conversations with actual action, to dedicate the resources to support the programs already underway. Her initiatives thus far, and I know there are more to come, send a clear signal that changes are in the works. And these changes will be pervasive, meaningful, and effective in creating a diverse and inclusive environment for all. Secondly, the Department of Global Leadership and Management will be developing and instituting a micro-credential on diversity and inclusion for undergraduate students. Yeah, I say yeah. This is still a work in process, but already we know that there are companies that are coming alongside us in partnership For some of our local companies, they are coming on board with us, and you will be hearing more about this and on. A third initiative comes from the Department of Marketing and Logistics. You want action? Well, here it is. Specifically, Nancy Richmond has developed a video contest for the MLK Jr. annual breakfast virtual celebration. So yes, this year's celebration will be virtual, and she has discussed with me the opportunity to test run this with our student organizations. So I've already advised NABA and other organizations I'll be bringing on board, the AMA, the Association for Marketing. And so we are going to be working with these two initial student organizations to develop videos for this contest. The contest eventually will be open to all FIU students. I think this is both an amazing and exciting opportunity. Your video entry should be 2 to 3 minutes long. It can include up to 5 students and should be inspired by the life, work, and ideals of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we know what these ideals are, right? They include freedom, they're at the nexus of exactly what we were discussing in this conversation. Freedom, equity, justice, peace, equality, civil rights, human rights, and social justice. Entries should be around this year's theme, Unite for Equity, the Power of Collective Action. So I can send you more information you can get. Deadline to enter this is November 22nd. For more information, please contact me directly or Dr. Richmond at NARICHMO@FIU.edu. We will put that in the chat. Finally, for individual faculty members, if you want to get involved, the time is now and here. Here we have it. We have 14 student organizations that are active in our college. Some of these organizations are still in need of faculty advisors. How about volunteering as a faculty advisor? You can sign up to be a mentor in our college as well. What better way to be on the forefront of leading and guiding change initiatives? The story is told of a distressed ship and its crew that was stuck for a few days in the South Atlantic. After sending out repeated calls and signals for help, as they were now without drinking water, finally, a response came back. Let down your buckets where you are. You see, unknown to the distressed crew, they had drifted into waters where the Amazon River pours into the Atlantic. And they were literally surrounded with fresh water. The point of the story is that despite the crisis we are in now, we have an amazing opportunity. We have the existing infrastructure that enables you, each faculty member, to participate and partner with our student leaders in creating change in our college. We need to let down our buckets where we are. There are student organizations waiting for you to partner with them. Come alongside and help. I ask you to be sensitive to our student organizations when they ask you to recruit in their classes. I ask you to, like Dr. Antoinette Smith, faculty advisor for NABA, who sends this note. Thank you to all professors who are encouraging and recognizing NABA members in their class. You change their entire world with just one acknowledgement. They came back to the chat and let us know, wow, my professor knew about NABA. End of quote. So this is a small example of how easy it is to get involved, to be an impact in your students' world. So once again, I implore you to let down your bucket where you are. We do have an infrastructure. We have a dean who is encouraging and supportive and you can come alongside. Thank you to all those who have already volunteered and are doing it and are helping our students. I want to encourage you to continue the good work, and I send out an invitation to others to come on aboard. So once again, thank you all for making this series a success. Stay tuned for more to come as we build on this momentum. Congratulations, our panelists, and thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.